Let's go Falcons! Unfortunately, the Atlanta Falcons are sitting on a bombshell, and they seem to have no way to defuse it. We'll talk about that and more, but first make sure to hit the like button to stay informed. Something strange is happening in Atlanta, and if you're a Falcons fan, you need to pay attention. Kirk Cousins is still on the roster, and that just triggered a $10 million roster bonus, something many, including myself, didn't see coming. This wasn't how the script was supposed to go. Cousins' comments in New Orleans seemed to be the final nail in the coffin. Did he play through a shoulder and elbow injury without the coaching staff knowing? Or did they know and cover it up? Either way, it was a bad look for everyone involved. Add in the fact that Cousins himself asked Arthur Blank to play for another team, and you'd think the Falcons would have moved on by now. But they didn't. They stuck to their guns. And now, Cousins remains a Falcon, for now. Let's talk about what that actually means. The Falcons had every opportunity to release him and avoid that $10 million hit, but they chose not to. That means one thing. They are 100% committed to trading him. They didn't just want to cut him for nothing. They're hoping for value. Here's where things get tricky. If a team trades Cousins, they're taking on that $10 million roster bonus as part of his contract. That's where things get tricky financially. If a team, say the Browns, wanted to trade Cousins right now, they wouldn't just be taking on his $27.5 million base salary. They'd also be taking on that $10 million roster bonus. That's $37.5 million in cash owed to Kirk Cousins this season. And let's be honest, no team is paying that price. So what happens now? There are only two ways this plays out. Option 1, a team agrees to a trade, but Atlanta eats some of the contract. This is a common practice in the NFL. If the Falcons pay part of Cousins' salary, they can ask for a higher draft pick in return. Instead of getting a 6th-round pick, they could push for a 4th if they cover part of the cost. Option 2, Cousins renegotiates his contract to make a trade easier. This would require him to lower his salary demands so that a team like Cleveland could bring him in without taking a huge financial hit. But here's the question, does Cousins even want to do that? This is a guy who has made more money in his career than Tom Brady. He's already secured over $250 million. At this point, does he prioritize money or playing time? Because if he sticks to his current contract, he runs the risk of getting released late in the offseason when all the starting jobs are already filled. He'd be left without a team, and his career would be in limbo. That's the gamble he's playing right now. Let's be clear, Kirk Cousins is not going to be on the Falcons roster in Week 1. Keeping him does not make sense for Michael Penix Jr.'s development. You don't want your rookie quarterback learning from a guy who doesn't want to be there. You want someone like Jacoby Brissett, who fully embraced mentoring Drake May last year. That's the kind of veteran you want in the QB room, not someone who asked the owner to trade him. So what's the trade market looking like? If the Falcons do move him, the most likely return is something similar to the Justin Fields trade. Fields was dealt to Pittsburgh for a conditional 6th-round pick that could turn into a 4th depending on playing time. That's probably the best-case scenario for Atlanta. If they cover some of the salary, they might get a 5th-rounder that turns into a 4th based on incentives, like if the acquiring team makes the playoffs or if Cousins plays 50% of the snaps. But don't expect anything crazy. The idea of getting a 3rd-round pick or higher is a fantasy. The market just isn't there. There's also the nuclear option. The Falcons could outright release him if a trade never materializes. That would mean they eat the $10 million, but honestly, that's Arthur Blank's money, not cap space. If Blank is okay cutting a check just for the chance to trade him, then financially, it's not a disaster. The only real risk? Looking foolish if they hold onto him too long and get stuck paying for a quarterback they never wanted in the first place. So now, the ball is in Kirk Cousins' court. Does he want to restructure his deal and find a new team? Or does he want to sit back, collect his money, and risk being unemployed in September? Falcons fans, what do you think? Was holding on to Cousins the right move, or should they have cut ties already? Do you believe a trade is coming, or is this whole thing about to blow up in their faces? Let me know in the comments. And here's where things get even more complicated. What if no trade happens? Let's say the Falcons hold on to Kirk Cousins, waiting for a team to bite, but the market never materializes. Maybe no team is willing to take on his $37.5 million salary, and maybe Cousins himself refuses to rework his contract. What then? At that point, Atlanta has to make a brutal decision. 1. Keep Cousins on the roster as an expensive, unhappy backup, something that could create a massive distraction in the locker room. 2. Cut him and eat the money, accepting that they gambled on a trade and lost. And here's the thing, the clock is ticking. Every day the Falcons keep Cousins, they're risking a messy situation if a deal isn't done before training camp. Can you imagine the media circus if Cousins shows up to camp and has to stand on the sidelines watching Michael Penix Jr. take first-team reps? How awkward would that be? How does that affect Penix's confidence? And that's where this situation is so unique. This isn't just about money, this is about setting up Penix for success. And keeping Cousins around doesn't do that. Think about how other teams handle rookie quarterbacks. Look at what the Patriots did for Drake May. They brought in Jacoby Brissett, a veteran who understands his role. Or what the Packers did for Jordan Love. They gave him a stable situation with a coaching staff that was fully committed to his growth. But in Atlanta, we have a backup quarterback who doesn't want to be here, and a front office that's trying to move him but hasn't found a way out yet. And let's not forget, Kirk Cousins isn't just some random backup. This is a guy who has been a starter his entire career. He's a vocal leader, someone who is used to commanding a locker room. Do you really want him hanging around, potentially undermining your new franchise quarterback? That's why this trade needs to happen. But who is the buyer? That's the million-dollar question. The Browns have been mentioned, but do they really want to pay $37.5 million for a quarterback who struggled down the stretch last season? Doubtful. Could the Raiders get involved? Maybe, but they don't have much cap space. What about a surprise team like the Seahawks or Broncos? There are options, but none of them are clear-cut choices. That's why the Falcons may have to get creative. One possibility? A salary-splitting swap. The Falcons could agree to pay some of Cousins' salary to sweeten the deal. Let's say Atlanta eats $15 million of the contract. Suddenly, a team like the Browns might be much more interested because they're now only on the hook for $22.5 million, a much more reasonable number. Or they could attach a draft pick to the deal, something like, we'll send you Kirk Cousins and a 5th-round pick, but in return, we want a 3rd-round pick back. These types of pick swap deals happen all the time in the NFL. But here's the reality, the longer the Falcons wait, the harder it is to make a trade. So now the pressure is on Terry Fontenot and Raheem Morris. They made the decision to keep Cousins after the roster bonus deadline. Now they have to prove it was the right decision. Because if they can't trade him, do you guys still believe a trade is coming? Let me know in the comments and be sure to subscribe and hit the like button. Go Falcons!